Hey, Chad.
Hi.
Oh my gosh. So we're neighbors, right? We
Right.
it's tell me, I don't know, there's so much to say because I just first and foremost, thank you for doing this and thank you for taking the time out of because a couple of months ago we were talking about just how busy it is to do this entire crazy thing as an
Yeah.
artwork, as an art, and you're doing your music with that and what all of those sort of things look like. And I'd be really curious to hear about maybe some of I know a little bit of your journey as far
Yeah.
as like because we both went to Graceland University, or we started out at Graceland College and then became a
Yes. That's
university
right.
when we were there. And so I don't know, just tell me, start where you want to start. How did
Yes.
we get here? How did we get
How
here? What do we
how did we get here? How did we get here? I
answer the
often ask.
cosmic questions?
That's what I say every day in the mirror. How did I get here? But I've always wanted to be an artist. But it's one of those things as 6-year-old, you're just trying to go, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to be an artist, and I took all the classes I could. But then, I get into high school and I get this paper from my English teacher, who happened to be my mom, and she's like, okay, kids, write what your day is gonna look like 10 years from now. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm gonna be an artist, but how is that gonna even work financially? It started to finally dawn on me that I had no idea how to piece
Yeah.
it together. And I went off to, Graceland, and got a degree in studio art and ceramics and sculpture, and I did went go off to grad school, for ceramics in Missoula, Montana. And it was there that I really just dawned on me that I really didn't want to go down that path as a professor. And I thought,
Form or
well,
function?
yeah, what's
Form
that?
or function?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking it's time for a little function stuff. And I went on to drop out to be a musician, and I didn't know how I was going to piece together a living, but I could see building an audience would be important to making money. And I thought, well, that's the best way to build an audience is to, start getting in front of people. And I didn't know how I was going to translate that into the art, but it's slowly transformed into this kind of all these cross disciplines, and really worked out for me that way, especially during the pandemic. I
Oh,
could
for
lean on
sure.
the other one while the music went away. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hmm.
Any funny? So you went on? Did you tour around when you're doing the music thing, or how did?
Yeah, nationwide. I've been touring since basically 2002 full time, 2003 actually. And it's been slowly growing, to where I've been across the country so many times, and it's small audiences, but that's really leans to building a good loyal following. So they're little house concerts, coffee houses, bars, and churches, and then that lend to knowing people on these different areas. And so when I do crowdfunding or something like that, I have these people that have been diehard fans throughout the years, that know me as a musician but also know me as an artist now, so it really lent to that, just kind of growing this grassroots thing.
Did was there any places that you're like, should I be staying here? That sort of thing. Where you're like, oh
Oh,
no,
oh yes. There's several I
cockroaches crawling around or anything. You're like,
yeah, there was a
I'm
Florida
not
gig.
taking off my shoes, even in the
Yeah,
shower.
some places I've stayed were sketchy, and I there was one that I literally showed up before the show, and I was gonna drop my bags off at this place, and it was down in Florida, and I picked up my bags and I go, yeah, okay, let's just all meet here after the show. And at the show, I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna roll on home, and so I just didn't stay the night. I was like, this isn't where I want to be. But yeah, there's lots of those stories.
So you had mentioned that doing a like as far as like crowdfunding or that sort of thing, or I guess in particular, like your hardcore fans and
Mhm.
having that, why is that important? I guess I'm curious what your answer is.
Yeah, it comes down to, when I was piecing it together in my head at the beginning of all this, is trying to figure out how to monetize what I was doing. I was thinking, well, first things first, I need people, and if I get a lot of people, great, but I need to be able to know if there's a dollar amount, how much I need to make every month, because it was literally a very practical thing saying every month I need to make this much to pay our bills and maybe
Right,
have a little extra for savings. And
right,
so that was a number I worked with, and I thought, well, I need this many shows and this many dollars, and how many people do I need to cross my path to do
right,
that?
right,
And it came down to just having a number in mind, thinking, okay, at a show, we did this thing called the One Horse Town Tour. My wife is my booking agent, so we both were sitting there going, how can we kind of think outside the box here? And so we just went to these small towns that don't have music in them, and we really relied on a tip basis, but it was the only thing in town. So you get 200 people there that shell in $100. It becomes this thing. So that's been my mentality even through Kickstarter, is if
mm-hmm.
if you're building this crowd base, to have, you want to be careful not to ask for too much all the time, but
Sure,
it really is a great way to kind of build a community, and they can follow what you're doing. And I
sure,
I, I kind of show my process, and I have a Patreon and everything, but really it relies on just visibility and attention.
yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely. Being in their the forefront of their mind. Otherwise, it's because of
Mm,
just how just interactive our world is. It kind of they get lost, or
yeah.
we get lost in the shuffle of
We do, yeah.
all the other things, not just who knows whatever else is going on. And so that's
Absolutely.
hard to stay in that
Mhm.
that interactive zone, I guess.
Yeah.
Is there like some sort of was it hard to gain those sort of key followers or what? Talk about that as far as like because that's really the basis of like having those key individuals
Yeah.
that even if it's a small number of 5 people that
Hmm.
because you also mentioned if they are like you don't want to ask too much or like too often, like you're constantly asking for something, but then
Yeah.
at the same time you don't want to be like, well, I still have to feed the kids or
Yeah.
feed the family or some
Yeah.
sort of thing. So how do you? What's kind of your philosophy for balancing that out
Hmm.
and the challenges that you're finding on kind of your end or from your perspective?
That's a great question, because there's so many ways and so many camps you can go into to do this. And for me, it was very organic, and it really, I, in order for me to sustain it, I thought I needed to be about my personality as well as like what fits my personality. What am I actually going to be able to do with my conscience, but also just my drive and feeling driven to keep creating and keeping a dialogue with people. And online
Hmm.
has been great for that, is to make it interesting for me, but also if it's interesting for me, I'm jumping around in all these different disciplines like music and art and writing and nature, and trying to incorporate all those things in kind of a flow. So when I'm putting on my posts or anything like that, it's I'm conscious of going, okay, the rhythm is really all about painting right now. I need to throw some music up. Maybe I'll
Right.
come write a song today and share the process. I'm very kind of behind the curtains. I show behind the curtains kind of person. So people watch me as I'm working on a piece of art. I'll do a video, and sometimes I'll say, I'm not feeling this. What do you guys think? Kind of thing. Not really I, saying I need your ideas, but more like it gets a dialogue in there, feel connected to it. I've done some live streaming concerts where I'm playing, but I also have a canvas behind me and I'm working on it. Part way through, I'll just play music and paint, and then I'll talk to them, and it becomes this really cool thing that happens to where they feel ownership in this. And it sells the painting before it's done, but that's really not the goal. The main goal is to keep that connection and maybe inspire, because I know a lot of people will send me photos of paintings because they were watching. They said, I'm painting now. Thanks for that, you know,
Cool.
which is
Well, that's one of
really,
the cool things about what we do is that I think if we had a chance and we were in sort of the utopia perfect world and we were given that sort of a thing, would you do this? And you're going to do it. You don't need to worry about, bread or, three meals and a cot sort of thing. You don't have to worry about any of those sort of things. We would be, and we would do this because we love doing it. It's not just the exploration, not just the learning and learning to improve our craft of whatever that is.
man,
But then at the other end of it too, finding ways to, it's more than just connecting with the human heart. I don't know, I guess an elemental state of just connecting with the soul and what
yeah,
that means and what that looks like. And then of course with your work, it's not just you're not just painting. Are you doing any sculpture or any kind of ceramics now? And certainly there's the music too, and all of
yeah.
those are certainly important components to your work, which is a little bit different. And so yeah, I don't know if you have a comment for any of that, but
Oh
what's your
yeah,
thoughts?
it definitely, that connection with the soul is key. And also, I'm hoping, I guess I've always thought this is, what can we do with the things we have? It always breaks my heart a little bit when I hear somebody having so much talent they just don't do anything with it. And I'm adamantly against that. I feel like we've been given these gifts that we need to or paths that we're supposed to explore, and it just is so alien to me. So I was just having a conversation recently about that, saying, I just don't understand somebody that can have that much gift and not wanting to use it at all. And I said, I'm the kind of person that will take a sponge and get to the bottom of that barrel and keep sopping it up, trying to find anything I have that I can use, to be inspiring or to be inspired, and
For
it's
sure.
yeah, and I do agree with, the continual learning has been amazing. In the last few years, I never saw myself painting so much. I've broken through different ideas that I had and tried new techniques that I would never have tried if I wasn't like full time, like during the pandemic, just painting every day. So I got bored easily. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try some new stuff out, you know and it's kept that drive and the passion going. So
That's cool. Because there was one thing you mentioned is that because sometimes circumstances are that individuals I certainly run to, I know you do too, of I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. I've got a day job. I've got all these other things to do. Or be it your circumstances are terrible and you don't have the means or
yeah,
let alone the time. You just or be it poverty or who knows what it is. I mean, the different things kind of plighting this world, but that finding just even if it's just and because kind of my philosophy is just finding an inch. If I can, like the rest of the world can do whatever, if I can just find 1 inch where I'm at least pushing these things, these ideas forward, um, perhaps it will one day touch someone else's heart and get them either to explore or certainly from an illustration standpoint and comic book standpoint of get them to be like, oh my gosh, the story and about
yeah,
hope and ideas about overcoming adversities or those sort of things.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
what are
I
your
love
thoughts on those sort of
I love
thing?
that. That is yeah, that's exactly my path has been kind of well, especially working with the kids, it's been, well, how what line do I draw when I'm doing working with these kids, because I feel like there's lots of ways we can kind of fragment off, and I've even heard stories about, Raffi, who had a really good songwriting career, and he went, well, it was kind of just a local thing, and then he went to a kindergarten class, started playing these kids songs, and it became this huge sensation, Wheels on the Bus and all that. But then he always felt like I need to go back to writing songs for adults as well, and he never did. So I was like, well, I don't want to fragment off that much. I like dancing and all these different things, but
Did you see
sometimes,
yourself? Did you
yeah.
like part of that 10-year plan or whatever in high school? Did you ever see yourself working with kids and
Yeah,
doing
I
that
think
sort of
I
thing?
did.
Or that was
I was
there?
always doing camps and stuff. Like we did camp together once, but no, yeah, I was always working with kids. Even like I remember I have a photo of me working as a eighth grader teaching the kid drawing. I was in a drawing class, so I loved working with kids. I did even toyed around with being an elementary ed, and I took a couple classes. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna go to studio art. I'm not. I have the utmost respect for teachers, but I can't do it. I don't have the
Mine
energy.
was accounting. I sat in accounting class and I'm like, nope,
I
I'm
can't
not
do it.
doing
Yeah, yeah.
that. So then I went to studio.
Well, we talked. You mentioned that they're due to circumstances that people can't sometimes find that path, and I was at a point where I dropping out of grad school. I thought I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to keep doing art. It won't be as a professor like I had originally planned, but I thought I could be the most destitute place, and I thought what. I even imagined what would that look like if I was completely destitute? Would I still make art? And I thought, yeah, I'll do graffiti with mud if I have to. I even thought about doing that, doing a whole project of graffiti train cars out of stained mud so to wash away. I
In the
won't get
cave
arrested.
of France.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Well, that was one thing that I struggled with was like the reading, and like all through school, and so I was put with I I grew up in a two parents, all those sort of things, so I had all those awesome commodities, and then on top of we weren't really well off, but ends were met.
right.
But the class, because of my learning disability, I was put into classroom where there were kids that weren't. I mean, they were uh, without a doubt poverty level. They were their home
Yeah.
life. Looking back, I didn't as a kid, I didn't see it, but looking back, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what some of those kids were going through.
Yeah.
And being told, no, you can't do this. No, this isn't. And of course, as that's one thing as artists, as far as like, no, this is too hard. No, get a real job or all those types of things.
Uh-huh.
And the older I've gotten, the more I realize, and of course, our world and how we go about interacting with each other is drastically and dramatically changing. So I
Yeah.
say all this with sort of because I also went to UNL, or I got my MA in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
Kansas, and then I went to go for my MFA at Lincoln, Nebraska,
Yeah.
and there's several reasons and all that sort of stuff, but it wasn't the right fit. And so I
Mm.
thought it was interesting that you had, because I dropped out after a year, just like, man, this is just not right.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a loaded question slash sort of
Yeah.
several stages because there's no right or wrong answer,
Mhm.
obviously. Because so, what's kind of your standpoint in going to graduate school? Because this, like, as artists, is it necessarily needed? Because I've seen some of the folks that I've interacted with, they're fresh out of high school, and the type of illustrations that are producing are like
Mhm. Right.
next level.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Mount Everest, K2, whatever level you want to put them at. And it's just like, wow, awesome stuff. And then, but I don't know, what's kind of your take on that? Because we are sitting in a standpoint, in my opinion, in a
Right.
standpoint where education's changing, but how do we reach the kids, but at the same time, adults too, or anyone interested in learning? And I guess the other part of that is also the way we perceive even just the definition of learning itself, I think
Mm.
is changing, and sort of like, man, because we sit in a standpoint in time, and I know I'm making this long, but we're sitting in a
Oh,
standpoint in time where information is, I mean, we can Google anything.
yeah.
You can go down to the
Right.
nether
Yeah.
regions black hole of the
Yeah.
internet,
Yeah.
lose your soul, and then somehow come back out.
Well, that's definitely an important point because at this point where you have the entire universe right here, it's like all the information we need is right there, but there's a certain thing that we're losing if without that. There is one-on-one thing that needs to happen, like a teacher to student or a
Mentorship.
community of artists that I
Yeah.
think is essential that a lot of people find in grad school, but I think that's confused that you can't do that anywhere else. But grad school or university, there are artist groups everywhere, and if there aren't, artists should start them, like you're doing. It's really cool to see that. I worked at an art gallery, teaching art classes. And then I also worked in a middle school in the transition room, which was the behavior room, which ended up to be a lot of the creative kids.
I
They're in
was
this
probably in
behavior.
that room.
Yes, I would have been too. And I remember I loved working with those kids because I could have the freedom to take my time, and they could and work with them. And if they needed help on their school, great. But a lot of times it was more just their home life was just they needed attention and they just needed some quiet. And but that art gallery that I worked with, I saw all ages. It was just this intergenerational thing, and I'm like, that is where learning is still happening. And I watched this old man that he'd come in and he'd work on a bust, a clay bust, and he would just keep coming in every day. He would be working on this thing, and you could tell he was on fire. Like, and I'm like, why? How is that any less important, than some of those graduate studies? And I I was a little frustrated in grad school, so I might have a little jaded perspective on it. But I realized really quick that I was like, I'm definitely, maybe it's my just growing up in a small town, or being from a place a home that's really open to new ideas, and also the accessibility, to learning, because it felt like they were like, we're kind of, you have to have a golden ticket to be here, and then we'll teach you. And at that point in my life, I was definitely not having any of that, because I was really about, let's strip away all pretense, let's get down to what the real bare essentials are, and that's really to find what we love to do, and make something beautiful or ugly or whatever, but make
Right.
something, with, and
Right.
yeah. So I don't know if that
No,
answers.
no, but I don't think, and what I hear you not saying, I say it this way, is that grad school is like the, um, I'll put it in the extreme, hell on earth. It's not sort of a thing where like it could be a good fit, or even
Right.
your university or college itself. It has some commodities that are important. Like I certainly look back to my time at Graceland, or even at
Yeah.
grad school. There were some very fond memories and very awesome friendships, and even friendships with professors that came out of that, and be it that matured on to become colleagues or other things like that. But but I think what you're pointing out too, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that it's not just the only place to find those things,
Yeah.
and that we how should I say this? Just the importance of even if we don't, because clearly university and grad school is beyond expensive, and
Hmm.
even if you don't necessarily have the be it the capabilities or the funding or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
that you still can find these pockets of creativity and nurturing that, or mentoring that creativity, um,
Totally.
in other environments. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it depends on each individual person, their journey, the type of school, anyone that's ever that asked me now, should I still go to graduate school? Because I'm finally finishing up my MFA. That's
Yeah,
happening
good.
right now.
Oh, yeah.
But I tell them that it's you have to find a school that you're working under professors that you are aligned with. If you're
Yeah.
not aligned, then in some form or another, and they have
Mhm.
different motives of whatever they might want to take your work or those types of things.
Mhm.
Not to say that exploration isn't important, then you're going to be frustrated. And
Yeah.
that was my experience at UNL. And is that
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved my professors. That's the funny thing is my professors at Missoula were they were all musicians and ceramicists. So it was they kind of got it. They were like, oh yeah, I would rather be on the road too right now instead of being a professor. So I kind of that mine was an easy out, but it was this feeling like, okay, if how am I going to use this to pay off my debts that I'm making right now as I'm sitting here? And I thought, well, the only way really I could get out of is to be a professor, unless I can find some way to monetize my art, which at the time I didn't see as a possibility. Now I see it, but I was so young, and so when I dropped out, I knew I was like, well, I will start trying to create something off of the many disciplines that I'm learning, and maybe add to the disciplines, and maybe it'll be a kind of a hodgepodge thing of all these different things I do, and slowly that grew into what I'm doing, which is a lot of different things, which is kind of my personality. I like to move around. I'll work on songs for 2 weeks and feel really inspired to do that, and then I'll get burnout and move on to painting. And
Do you find that helps? Do you find that helps to be able to switch between the different medias, and that helps that
definitely,
creativity, or that you said getting bored or that sort of thing? And
yeah, I kind of
or
think of it as seasonal, or like harvesting. You go and you plant all these seeds, and you get down to where you're harvesting these things, and then you eventually it kind of is like, okay, now's the time to just let this rest, and I should probably work on this. So it's been a balancing act of finding that throughout all these years, like 20 some years. I finally
have you
feel like,
found it?
yeah, I finally found a good flow. It's been working for us. Like I know now not to expect many shows in the wintertime anyway. I was like, it was always slowed down. So I was just feel naturally inclined to paint more and and write and record more in the wintertime. Spring is when I write a ton of songs, same as fall. But that's also when I paint and write. And then summer, I'm just constantly playing shows, knowing I'm just out in front of a public with all these things that I've created. And it's been like that for years now, just this growing that and finding really where I can be at peace, not worrying, oh, this is the last song I'll ever write. I'll never, you know.
But you never discovered that sort of process. Like day one, it was like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, and it's gonna work.
Yeah, no.
It took, like you said,
Lots of time
many
with her.
years of failure to
Yeah.
get.
And excusing yourself from if it doesn't feel like 100% on, like it is a lot of internal work that comes with that as an artist, right? Especially building an income. It takes knowing, also setting a price for your work it takes a lot of knowing yourself before you can even do that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot of the things, even as a musician, trying to work with other younger musicians, telling them, you got to know who you are, what you're bringing, and the venue you're playing, and the people you're playing to, and that'll help you gauge what your price is. Because sometimes you want to work with a place that you love because it nurtures a good listening room, so you'll cut them a break on the price. And so it's a really organic thing that I'm always on the fence going, am I doing this right? But
Do you find that by doing one or the other, as far how it, I guess, may I say it this way, how has it affected, be it playing music or painting, or are you doing other forms other than painting, or?
Yeah, I've just started a clay, a handful of sculptures. I'm going to do more. I'm working on an exhibition of figurative work, sculptures and some pottery in there, but that's harder to get because of the studio problems. But like what I've noticed though, as far as the relationships between those things, like the music has given me this out with making a living as an artist. I was really could just make what I wanted to make, and knowing whoever's at my concerts, they might be paying attention to that if I post something or share my artwork. They're invested in me as a songwriter, but they see the kind of the collaboration between what I'm doing as an artist as well. And I I kind of knew. Obviously, I couldn't have planned this, but I had this inclination when I left grad school. I was like, I need people. I don't have people. I don't want to just a stale art exhibit, even though I love setting up art exhibits. I had just got done working with Andy Goldsworthy, the
Okay.
great, ephemeral artist who kind of blew my mind as like, it's not just frames on a wall or sculpture, it's really could be this experience thing. And they really made me go question everything I was doing as an artist. But it
Interesting.
was like, I just need people to experience. And then what I create, hopefully they'll appreciate,
Not just some woods in the Idaho, in the
Yeah,
mountains
exactly.
somewhere where there's no other human being for miles.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
how has that affected your perspective on teaching and that
Mm.
sort of thing too? How does that all combine with that as well to kind of
Oh,
bring that
yeah.
back a little bit?
I think we had kind of just a quick conversation about this at one point where we were talking about how we weren't really taught how to do this as a living, the practicality of it. And a
The
lot of my
theory of
convers
it as far as like the art goes and those types of things,
yeah, yeah,
never the practicality of it.
yeah. So a lot of my conversations with people when I talk, they're often, I don't even have to bring it up. They'll bring it up. How am I supposed to make this work financially? And how do you do it? And it's been more about that than anything. And I'll get texts from younger artists that are asking, okay, so I set up an LLC or how do, these are things that we weren't taught in college. And we probably should have had a few conversations about it. But I luckily married a math major. No, she moved on to journalism, but she's very good with numbers.
That's important. That's really
Yeah,
important.
yeah. So
Has
learn.
that so what would be one big thing, or there's probably not just one, so it can stem off to 100 things. But what
Hmm.
would be something that you would, if you could go back to your high school Chad Elliott, yo dude, do
Yeah,
this.
yes.
Start with this. Don't.
Oh, yeah. It's hard because college I met some of my favorite friends and
Yeah,
people, but I could have been working right away and had no problems there. You know, Luckily I don't have as much, regret because the, internet wasn't quite had around when I first started college. So when it was finally going gangbusters, then I was like, okay, I got to jump on this. But I do think that there are a lot of having a guidance counselor tell me, that you're not going to be able to make a living at this. How are you going to do this, in college, in high school? And I was always kind of, I broke a lot of rules as a youth, I'll say that. And my mom, thank goodness, she was the one that kind of just said, if you can't have your dreams at 17, when can you? And so I already had somebody in my corner saying, I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's going to do it. And
cool.
so, yeah, so I had that all along, even through college. Um, but I would say get busy working, work on the things that you want to do now. Like when you're 80 years old, what do you want to do? Do it now. Start and maybe find somebody that you can follow. Apprenticeships are great for that. get under somebody that you want to do, that you want to learn what they're doing. I had a great job shadow when I was in high school. It was this guy. He built his own house out of recycled goods, and it didn't look like it. It was a really 2-story, had a spiral staircase and everything, but he had like train booths as his kitchen table, and like a gym floor was his, gymnasium floor that he'd ripped up. So it was this really unique guy. But we're pouring iron for this kids class, um, and we're doing all these little iron sculptures that they made in the class. And then he goes and reads me some of his poetry that he'd written, and it was just this entire cross-discipline thing. And then he was playing music to me later on that night. So it was this amazing job shadow. I'm going, well, maybe I did turn into this guy,
That's awesome. Is
Yeah.
there like, because like for me, it was sitting in accounting class, and I'm like, I'm not, forget this. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go do studio art, and
Yeah.
but at the same time, I don't, like you were saying, I don't regret it. I don't regret those decisions, but um I ended up, long story short, I ended up finding sort of a love for stories and sharing in those stories and those types of things. And also along the way, that a love for teaching, and what does that, what is it, I guess, 2022, what does an ideal teaching environment look like? Because I'm sure the kids teaching today, of course, they have access to things never thought of. I mean, for having an iPhone in your pocket when we were kids, look at that idiot, nerd. We'd get all those sort of things. But now it's just it's common knowledge, and back to, I guess, that having everything at our fingertips. Everything is so accessible. Everything, the good, the bad, everything. And how do we, I guess, what's your philosophy as that learning and teaching, the enthusiasm for the craft, and then at the same time, what's that look like? And I don't know if can you answer this cosmic question of?
Totally. I get what you're saying. And, I have a framework that I work with when I think about this stuff. Well, again, my mom had this great advice, as she reads a lot about creativity, and she said, parameters are not bad. They actually enhance creativity. And with the, information completely, the world at your fingertips, I worry about youth being fragmented because it's so overwhelming. You could go so many possibilities. Whereas if you have parameters, you can go deep and really go creative with these things. And so I always think of that as like a metaphor, going, okay, with the internet and everything, I need my own parameters. What are those? What do those look like? And I think, well, I know that anything that kind of piques my interest, I should just explore that and go down this rabbit hole, and just stay on it for a while, because it's really easy to just jump all over when it comes to inspiration. But I've found that that's helped me as a writer, but also as an artist, is just to go, I'm not just going to hang in this little space here and see what I can do off of that. And all this the rest of the world is, I could easily pick. I'll never run out of inspiration, and no one should really, because it's so, I mean, it's overwhelming. So I think that giving yourself parameters is a huge boost. If it is, like you were saying, stories, if it's a story line or that you really love, you can find the many different ways of telling that one story, like the hero's journey, like all of this. There's how many versions of that? Thousands of them. And what's one more? It's one more great story.
Well, and we're on our own hero's journey too, of that
Amen.
discovery and emotion and reluctant. We don't want to go on it. This is crazy. You're out of your mind. Is there something as far as like business related that you do either on a day-to-day or weekly basis to help keep, be it your pipeline full, or be it ways of, is it sort of email lists, or what are some things that you're doing, or just scheduling? For me, one big thing that I do is that I have kind of every quarter I try to do kind of a list of all the goals. Okay, these are all
Yeah.
the things, these are the big things that I want to accomplish.
Hmm.
And then as far as a year, 5 years, 10, all these sort of big things. And then I break that down into, as far as like a weekly basis, different things that I projects that are ongoing, or different things that I
Yeah.
need to do accomplish in a week. And that helps ground me in, as far as what you were just talking about, so that the parameters, a
Totally.
one is time and that sort of thing, because then you can go off on some rabbit hole, or b, you
Yeah.
get lost in the interwebs of wherever that may go. And
Yeah.
that's, or Instagram, or all these sort of device sort of things. And
Hmm.
um that also has led me to like do other things, not just digital work, but also do it in hand. And what's that look like in balance too? So I guess, back to the sort of the schedule of just mapping
Yeah.
out my week. Here's what my week, here's the things. And I, more often than not, I don't accomplish everything that I wrote down,
No.
but
But
it helps kind of at least, okay, what's my end result, the
mhm.
big picture on what I'm trying to accomplish. And the second thing I try to answer on a weekly basis is why this is so important to me. Why is this
Yeah.
worth my time? So
Yeah.
those are, that's not, it kind of blends as sort of philosophy, but also as far as business goes. But what are
Yeah.
something that you do to help with
That's
any
the
of those sort of things, or
yeah.
what things that
I
help
do
you?
set goals like that. I wish I was better at the daily. I do a pretty good job of like, okay, I'm gonna write. I typically have found this flow now of doing like 100 songs a year, and it's
That's
not.
awesome.
Yeah, it's this number that's like seemed crazy back years ago, but I've been doing it so long now. It just seems like, and I have this Google Drive, that I just that's the one thing that I'm most organized about is my Google Drive, files. It's like, here's where I know each year I've got them labeled. And that's been my daily. It's like try and do one a day. I know I'm not going to be able to do one a day. So 100 seems like a manageable number. And at the, at the end of every year, I go and I print them all up. I'm real proud. I have this stack of these songs that I can pick and choose from. And so as a songwriter, I have it set up to where I could record a really good demo. So if I ever wanted to just release an album, I could just do it like that. But there, as far as an artist stuff, I paint all the time, and I get a big mess of canvases at one point, and then I just kind of go, okay, I'm gonna just make this a daily thing, maybe a painting a day, or try and get a couple in a week, maybe sometimes if it's real busy. And I love the process of sharing it online while I'm working on it too, because that it's become an essential part of my process, which I
You mean
never
sharing
envisioned.
the process, not just the end product. You're sharing
Yeah,
yeah, the whole
yeah.
creative
From
experience.
the underwash, doing the underwashes, and people can see that, and then I add layers, and they go, "Whoa, I didn't see that happening." And I try and shut out anybody telling me what it's going to be. I just kind of erase. That doesn't matter affect me anymore. Back in college, just be like, "Oh, please don't," but don't affect my personality here. But
I hated like, man, this is not complete. It's going to get eviscerated.
yes. So I do. I have a constant process of having the paints out. I've got it set up where underneath there's a suitcase that I travel with, and I'll have that in a hotel room when I'm on the road. And if I want to work on art, I have my stuff. It's real
That's
portable.
cool.
Yeah, I have an easel that I can just throw up and put up a canvas. And
That's
so
cool.
yeah, it's almost like become um, just this constant rhythm of creating stuff, like writing or
Well,
music
it's
or
one. Yeah, because that's one of the reasons I do this, because I know that my, like, how I go about it, just it might work for this
yeah,
next month or whatever. And I've been doing this for about a year and a half now,
yeah,
but I also come at it with knowing that it's not, maybe, next a year or two down the road, it's something, maybe I've grown out of that, and because
Yeah.
having that conversation, that's one thing about what I try to do, is that having direct conversations with artists as far as like, oh, well, that's cool what you do, but
Yeah.
then you're of course doing something else entirely, but
Yeah.
still working within that so that you can, one of the problems that especially in this kind of bleeds into fine art arena, where the fine art versus illustration. Illustration is like, you got to be pumping out the work, and you're just
Yeah.
basically like a cog in the wheels, like at Marvel or DC. You're me.
Yeah.
You're just inking pages. You don't care what
Yeah.
it is. You're whatever. And so you have that side of it where you're just sort of a cog in the wheel or whatever. And illustration really gets kind of in that mode. But then the other side, which is your side, more of that, in that fine art side, where your more work has more, it has illustrative qualities. And I'm not trying
Well,
to like
yeah.
one is the better
Totally.
than the other
Yeah.
illustration, but but
Exactly. Yeah.
but but how do you, because someone says, well, I want to make art, but I don't want it to be something that becomes just a cog in the wheel. Like I'm just in order to put bread on the table and have a roof over my head, all those sort of, clothes on my back. That's good and important. That's okay to strive
Right.
for beyond those things too. But I don't want my work to be punished at the expense of getting those
Totally.
things to help ultimately fuel my work, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's
Totally.
one of the struggles that I'm seeing a lot between artists, is like, I don't want to be that cog, but at the same time, how do I, so
Yeah.
you kind of got into that a little bit with what you're last talking about, as far as that balance between that, and finding that spot. And we've been talking about how you go about, as far as how you've gone about finding that I guess that golden area of what that looks like for you. But that was a struggle to get there, right? I mean, it took.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I put down my paints for a long time because well, at first, especially when I was really young, because I didn't know how I was gonna approach. I went, you learn a certain way academically how to draw and paint, and and a lot of it was off of still lifes and real, figure studies and things like that. Then there's a place where you start getting to where you're going, okay, so now I have these skills. Who am I? What do how can I interject my own, concepts into this thing that I've learned? And then I also had to unlearn a lot of things because it was, because I was right. I've always ridden on that line of going, well, I'm not an academic artist, I'm not, an oil painter. I've used acrylics because it's fast and it's easy and it's quick for me. And I always think of my paintings as not masterpieces, but sketches. I think of them as like, okay, they're quick, they're done, they're colorful. There you go. It's like snapshots from my imagination. That's about all I think of them as. But that has also limited me from going into galleries a lot of ways because I've not wanted to go down that route as much. Um, where was I going with that? But yeah, I think that it really does come down to telling your own story. And it's the same as songwriting. When I think of writing songs, you can go a lot of different ways. In Nashville, I've sat there in Music Row and we break down a song and we
Mhm.
we co-write, and it's for the market, and we're writing this song and it has so little emotional connection to me but it's a good song. It's a great song that we all wrote together. But
Mhm.
my best songs are not those. Those are the
Right.
ones that share a little bit of your soul and your life story into a song. That I think that's the key in all art, all the different art, theater, music,
Yeah.
writing,
But do
is
you
that
ever feel like it's ever sort of just becomes sort of a job? Because that's like, I want it to be my the energy and all those sort of things were like, but at the same time, it can become a job. It can like that grind of that, but then on the flip side of it is you still do need to do maybe the show or the song that, you know, you did it as a group, whatever, but ultimately that can
Yeah.
then bring in funding to pay the real stuff that you want to do.
Yeah.
The
I usually have a list
stuff
of commissions, like,
that
yeah,
balancing that out and that yeah.
totally. That's commission work for me too. Is sometimes I like doing commission work when it's something that you know, they go, well, I like what you did with that one, but do something like that, but whatever you want to do, you know, something a little more freedom. But when I've done so many pieces,
Parameters.
this is how many cardinals I want in this painting, and it's like, oh, there's a little bit of a grind there, and it does feel like work. And then I always remind myself, going, well, remember when you worked, you know, concrete construction that summer? That's work, and I can do this, Chad. You can push through this, and usually even the things that, like, I've got these big mural work that I know will pay off at the end, but there's all the grind of just all the setting up the equipment and getting all the details done on these huge paintings. It's literally, you have to just give yourself a pep talk. You know, you can do this.
So what was your, I'll answer the question, but for me, but what was the worst summer
Oh,
job you've ever had? Mine was working in Kansas City at Worlds of Fun. Worst job I've ever had.
really? Really? What was that? Do
So I'll
tell.
tell you a story. I'll tell you a story. So there was, I did the what was called the ride called the Boomerang. And I was in a part of, for most of the summer, I was a part of just checking everybody's seat, going
Yeah.
along the line, checking everybody's seat. Okay, everyone's locked in. Oh, this one's not locking. Okay, we got to shut the ride down, whatever. And then call up the maintenance dudes and they do their thing. That was the majority of it. And I kept avoiding, they wanted me to take a test so I could actually run the ride. So you're the one hitting the button, stay in your seats, all this sort of stuff, or the
Yeah.
loudspeaker sort of a thing. I avoided it. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want the responsibility, because that, like, for these amusement park sort of things, there's always like someone
Yeah.
was like, they jumped out of their seat or whatever. Like,
Oh,
of course, my dad's a lawyer, and so I'm like, man, I
yeah.
just I
No,
want no
no.
part of this, like, whatsoever. So anyway, they kept, yeah, okay, you need to take the test. Okay, fine, I'll take the test. I the first time I took it, I failed the first time. I was like, I think inherently I didn't want anything to do with it. So subconsciously, I'm like answering that one wrong, because
Yeah.
eventually I did pass the test. And it got so redundant. There was a few rides I let the whole ride go through twice. So they would go through and then, Eli, you're supposed to stop the ride. Like, what? Like, like, did I just fall asleep? I don't remember the last 10 minutes of time. So they're like, at that point, there was one day I was just like, I can't go in. And they called me up and they said, are you sick or anything? I'm like, I can't do this job anymore. And I quit. It's the only job I've ever just sort of like, I
Yes.
didn't give like 2 weeks notice or whatever. I've always been sort of studious, but that one is like, I'm going to get someone killed. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. You got
So
the
I set myself
responsibility.
up for failure, probably, if you want to get analytical.
Totally. Yeah. That
That
was a
was my
couple
worst
jobs.
job.
Yeah, that would have been. Casino was pretty bad for me. It was working the casino in Osceola. It was only for a couple months, but it was enough to make me go, no. I that was the same thing. I was I didn't even give them notice. I just didn't show up, and I felt no obligation either, because this was such a high, like, um, security kind of thing. You're always doing this, trying to make sure you don't have money in your hands, and cameras are watching you, and this anxiety looming over. And plus just the constant smoking and the noise and just everything. The culture was not for me, and
Well,
I
and we're
gave
not
it.
obviously saying at the same time of like, if you could do those jobs, by all means, do them.
Yeah, go
You help
for it.
out the world, that you really do. But
This was not for
I was
me.
gonna just
Now I think now that I don't need the money, that would be an interesting, sociological experience to go
To
far
go back
back.
through and
Yeah, because I probably could write some good songs off that. But when they,
awesome.
yeah, that and the concrete construction was pretty tough. I
I'm sure.
physically demanding and 100-degree weather, just carrying these huge pans and trying to build the forms to pour concrete into the foundations of houses and stuff. And I was beat.
Well, it's those things that help us appreciate certainly what we have, the time that, and who knows how long we have in any given day as far as the
Hmm.
opportunity to do the creativity or the illustrations, the drawing, the painting, the music. We don't know how much time we have with those, and
Yeah.
it just it it just those types of experiences highlight the opportunity that we have. And
Yeah.
even if, let's say, for example, someone comes along and all they have is, 10 minutes out of the day of their whatever their day is,
Yeah.
and they have to sketch and draw. So that's why it's kind of cool that you bring your suitcase around of it in between, just either
Yeah.
traveling or are you traveling, excuse me, with other people right now, or you just pretty much you go on your own type of thing in your van
No,
or
yeah, pretty much alone in the van. This on the longer tours, it's just you can't monetize it as much with other people. You're paying for them and their meals, and it just eats into the expenses. But hopefully someday I'll be able to bring a little trio or something on the road. I used to tour with a friend of mine who actually went to Graceland too, Tommy Lewis, and he played
okay.
lead guitar. And he was a young bachelor, so he didn't eat a lot. He just, feed me some Mexican food and maybe some money a little bit on the tip jar. So it was great because we had a lot of camaraderie along the road. But yeah, I bring those things along, and it's funny how that will work if you're just constantly sharing and paying attention. I was writing poetry on one of my tours and sharing the poetry on Instagram with a really cool image that I could find. And I just shared it regularly. It was this consistent thing I was doing just for my own pleasure because it broke the rules of songwriting. You didn't have the same meter and rhyming schemes or anything. I could write, and it really started to kind of get some attention, and I got a publisher. They published my poems, and I was just off of my Instagrams. So you
That's
never know what those little rabbit holes can kind of take you if you really just give it some time.
well, and the importance of putting that out there too,
Hmm.
which can be like
Yeah.
you're saying the whole creative process. Where like I
Yeah.
don't want to show my underpainting or my
Yeah.
my top secret of how I go about doing whatever that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
That encouragement too. Is there sort of like any kind of thing that someone just starting out, what would be the because so I asked this so we interviewed a comic book writer who's also
Mhm.
we're going to be in this amazing in an illustrator in Greece, Lambros.
Yeah.
And he does stuff for like Blizzard or whatever video games and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And one of the things that caught my eye with him was that he was talking about have patience with yourself to be able to just like to struggle through it. You're not going to be able to figure out how to draw the human figure in a
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to
Exactly.
take you time. It can take you a long time. For me, it feels like, it's been about just 5 years of just nonstop, just boom, boom, boom. I guess be it songwriting or even acrylic painting or how I don't know what's something for
Yeah.
you that you would say that hey man you're starting out doing this. This is
Yep.
one thing you can't let this fall off the cart.
Well, I would definitely say uh,
There's hundreds of things,
there
obviously.
are. The one thing that really got me going is my perspective on the whole thing. Well, even from early on, I knew what I was doing was not for the market as much as I was trying to do it for my great grandkids. you know,
Mhm.
that aren't alive yet, you know, they're just, I'm thinking, what is my stamp here, and what is my story that I'm telling? And it will also mean that I've got to dedicate my entire life to this, and it's going to change, and it's going to be organic throughout my life. But if I think of it that way, from a grand big perspective, I'm gonna know I'm doing making some right choices. You know, as far as my artistic integrity is gonna
Yeah,
be intact throughout that, and
yeah.
I'll go down different rabbit holes. But like the paintings I do, I always think of them as those sketches, because I'm thinking my mass my grand thing, you know, my pièce de résistance or whatever, you know, the it's going to be the big breadth of all the creative projects I've done. It's not going to be one thing. And so I'm just continually thinking that. And also, the first thing I did when I first started writing songs, a little trick was, I spent 3 years trying to write my first song. I was such a critic, you know, and I just had to turn off the critic in my head. And I said, this week I'm going to write 20 terrible songs. And there are going to be 20 of them by the end of the week. I don't care how bad they are. And that got me over the hump. And it's been 20 some years now of writing like constantly because of that little trick. And I think there's something to that, where we're allowing patience, like your friend was saying, but also, you know, just turning off those critics enough to where you can get the work done, edit it later, you know, but turn it off, you know, and have fun with it. So, so I'm
That's
thinking of two different spectrums, you know, the
no, that's
beginning and you know, but
no, that's good, because one of the things that I'd like to, when we do our consulting, that sort of thing, we start out with and actually Creative Capital did this too when I did a workshop up there in Des Moines, Iowa.
yeah,
They did a writer. The first thing that's do was write your obituary, and you're just
yeah,
like, what? This is morbid. What are you talking? But it like you're saying it. Okay, what's the big goal here? What's this all
yeah,
about? What's the and I really do hear a lot of people asking this, even if it's subconsciously, and that might be where maybe your music writing, or even the
yeah,
teaching of the kids, or the acrylic painting, or those sort of things are definitely the big question is why. I think we're all asking subconsciously, the human race.
yeah,
And it sounds as probably as ridiculous as some us here in small town Iowa type of a thing,
yeah,
but asking the question of, I really think everyone's asking the question, what's the point of this? Why are we here? What's
yeah,
this all about? And even if it's, we don't necessarily have the answers to those massive impossible questions, I
yeah,
think it's really interesting that we're asking them. And I also, that gets to the heart of why it is important to write.
mhm,
Where's this going to lead? What do I want to be remembered as? What do I want? Or even if I'm not remembered as that thing, whatever that is, that my kids could be
yeah,
proud of that work, and then in some form, whatever that might be able to carry on that
yeah,
endeavor. Because even
yeah.
if it's not necessarily art or comics or whatever, or those sort of things, that
I agree. I think that's exactly it. I've always been fascinated by people's stories anyway, you know, and I'm just giving them lots of color, you know, to my story. For, you know, I even strangers, I find them there, if they dive down and they tell it, bare their souls, and they're telling their entire life story, or it's a breadth of work throughout their life. I'm just fascinated by that. And I thought, well, in the least, that's what I'm doing for my own life, is just giving that one little perspective from the world, you know, and no, I'm leaving no stone unturned, you know, and so that'll be at least documented and recorded, and through images and music and stories. So
because we want, I think we want our lives to have value, and I think there's
absolutely.
those massive pieces to it. I don't know if we'll solve it here.
Yeah. Probably
Whether our
not.
destinies to the stars, or I don't know,
Yeah,
to
it's in the
planet
asking.
to
That's
not
right.
you, or whatever.
Let me know. Give me a call if you do.
Well, dude. Oh my gosh, it's been really good to hang out with you, Chad. I think part of it is it's been a long time coming because when we were together at Graceland, just
Yeah.
seeing that first some of those first steps, and
Mhm.
I don't know if that was your first CD that I picked up or whatever. Of course,
Yeah, it
now it's
was.
not CDs, it's YouTube videos, and if it's
Yeah.
on iTunes type of a thing. But seeing that creative journey, and then also seeing that tenacity to,
Mm.
because I'm sure, and I'm curious to hear this, how many times did you feel like, oh my, this, what am I doing? I am wasting my time here. This is crazy. Maybe I
Yeah.
should just shovel cement or whatever that is. I
Yeah.
but to I I guess what I'm trying to say is just I appreciate your story and your journey. It has,
Thank you for
for
that.
me personally, it's been an inspiration of just like, okay, Chad, he's on the other
Still
side
going.
over there. He's
Still
doing
trying.
it, and it's exciting, and he's trying to and struggling, and
Mm.
that hope to other artists. I think what you were talking about, going to shows around the
Uh-huh.
country, is incredibly uplifting, because I think we all want to either find that purpose, or we're to keep going after our hero's journey. I'm rambling
Totally.
on, but does that make
Oh,
sense?
I totally makes sense. Yes, that's the that means a lot to me because that's why I do it. And in many ways, it's it's the lives that we're touching and that they're sharing on this planet. We're only here for a brief time, and so that gathers strength in each other. So that's inspiring to me. So.
Well, when my dad was, I don't want to make this about me because I want to hear your side of the story, but when my dad was passing away, we got a way to connect with the Peter Jackson or whatever Lord of the Rings, and they send us an off the record copy that wasn't sanctioned by the studio or whatever, and it was still in theaters. This was like in December,
Wow.
of that year of Return of the King. And one of the things, and his wife that did the movie wrote a handwritten card. We were blown away by it, and of course, going through just a heart wrenching moment of losing your parent and all those types of things.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you had just said that they wrote on there is that they were they were they kept saying over and over in their different correspondence, as far as we hope that you're okay with the adaptation of the movie from Lord of the Rings or whatever. And of course, now the buzz of Amazon or whatever is kind of funny, but
Yeah.
here nor
Yeah.
there. But one of the things they said is that I think we had written in there how that's the story was such a touching moment in my dad and my life, and how, and they basically said in a nutshell, this is why we do movies, so that it will touch someone else's life. This is why we do it. It was such a, even from someone that New
Yeah.
Zealand, whatever other side of the planet,
Incredible.
and that
Wow.
effect that we can have of like, we don't know that effect that we can have on others, for positive or negative. Ultimately, I think, in my personal belief, that it is, will ultimately be for the positive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
this is why we do it. This is why
Yeah.
the struggle. I can't imagine being Peter Jackson or whatever.
No.
Of like the
Me
amount of
neither.
years that you got to be out of your mind. If we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
crazy,
A
you're
little
crazy.
bit. Yes. That's incredible. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. It's the people that that get that. They're kind of holding up a mirror to us to say this is what's possible, and this is and telling these great stories. I was a huge Joseph Campbell fan from when I was younger. My mom was a mythology teacher, and so she would teach these great myths. And so it was always in my blood. So when I got the, Joseph Campbell, and several books of his, the Joseph
Yes.
Campbell Companion was never left my backpack. It was just completely rain drenched and everything. But during my hardest times, I always had this thing, and it gave me a little bit of frame of reference going, it's all worth it if you can get to the other side and hopefully bring it back and teach others, what you've learned along the way. So that's you're speaking my language.
Well, that's so true. That's true. And the fact that all the stories, regardless of with what mythology you're talking about,
Yeah.
from early days, whatever dynasty in
Yeah.
China has
Or-
a similar sort of
yeah.
Beauty and the Beast story on some other
Mhm.
culture of the world, that Aborigine that never
Yeah. The
touched each other,
connection.
but
Yeah.
that connection's there, that human connection.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you for spending the time here, Chad.
Yeah.
Again, I can't, really, really appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time. What's the best way for individuals out there that want to find the work that you're doing? What's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, all the links are chadelliott.net. So you can go to my children's books, to my music, to art, all of there. So it's a good hub. And
Cool.
that's Elliott with 2 T's. Yeah.
2 L's, 2 T's.
Yeah, that's always gets them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time, Chad. You're
Yeah.
going to hang around after we're done recording here, but everybody else, see ya, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.